Welcome to the Cross in the Desert. I'm your host, Randy L. Noble. So glad that you've set aside a few minutes for this evening's broadcast. Just this past week, as a baseball fan, I was enjoying the very tough, competitive World Series between the St. Louis Cardinals and the Boston Red Sox. But over the weekend, the Cardinals lost 2 in a row to Boston and let them right back into the series, and the games were 3-2, Boston leading with the series going back to Boston. Tough situation for the Cardinals. Well, on Monday evening, not a good night for the Cardinals. They were losing rapidly, and it looked as though Boston would win the World Series against the Cardinals for the second time in a row. And as I was listening to the game and feeling a bit depressed and overwhelmed with the odds against my favorite team, it's like the Lord yanked me back to reality, to the things that really, really matter in life. Oh, sports are fun, and I enjoy them, I'm sure, just like you. But there are things more important than that in the world. And as I was feeling a little bit low because my team was losing and looked as though that they were going to lose the World Series, which eventually they did, it's like the Lord yanked me back to reality. And I saw a posting on Facebook that shocked me. You know, all of us read stories every day and we go, what? How can that be? There are some stories that grab us by the heart, and we're sad and just feeling hopeless after reading them. But nothing quite prepared me for the story I'm going to share with you. I have a blog called The Cross in the Desert, and I send my blogs out literally all over the world. I feature them at my book signings. And these are articles written sharing Jesus with Muslims. Specifically, they're articles dealing with the happenings in Iran. This one took me beyond Iran. It went to Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Muhammad, the birthplace and the beginnings of Islam. And I want to read you this blog, really literally word for word, because I think that you'll get the better effect out of it if I read it to you. I entitled this, Who Will Speak Up for the Little Ones? Over 3 decades ago, the brilliant guitarist and Christian musician Phil Keaggy wrote a beautiful tribute song for the unborn entitled Little Ones. The song was written to give a voice to the unborn children who were being selfishly sacrificed on the altar of choice by abortion rights activists. At the beginning of this beautiful song, Phil asks the all-important question. This is the chorus of the song. Who will speak up for the little ones, helpless and half-abandoned? They have the right to choose life they don't want to lose. I've got to speak up. Won't you? Just a tremendous song, and on my blog, at the end of it, you're going to see also a little square. You can click on it. It's the video, the lyrics, and some pictures to this song. It's an incredible song. I immediately thought of this song by Phil Keaggy after reading the horrific story of a 3-year-old girl that was gang raped by Muslim men in Saudi Arabia. Police in the Red Sea city of Jeddah, reported that 3 men and 2 women have been taken into custody as suspects in the gang rape of a 3-year-old girl. On September 13th, a private hospital discovered the body of a 3-year-old girl that had been dumped off at the front gate. The young child was screaming in pain. Her clothes had been torn. Her body was covered with bruises, and she was suffering from vaginal bleeding. Shortly after being found, the little 3-year-old girl sadly lapsed into a coma. I was speechless after reading this story. To say that I was outraged would be an understatement. What kind of animals would do such a thing to a precious, innocent 3-year-old girl? How can anyone stoop to such a level as to commit such a travesty, such a crime? How deep the human depravity, how deep the darkness and deceit of sins. Words fail me at this point. Needless to say, I was broken and in tears after reading this, and I immediately posted the story to my Facebook page. What kind of punishment do these animals deserve for such an act? In Saudi Arabia, under Sharia law, men and women are stoned for committing the act of adultery. The judicial system beheads women who are guilty of practicing witchcraft and sorcery. Women are banned from driving and obtaining licenses. Obviously, Saudi Arabia is a country that is well recognized for its discriminatory practices against its women. That being said, my question is, in the case of this 3-year-old girl, the question is, will the judicial system stand up for her rights and severely punish those responsible for this atrocity? Whenever you read about rape cases in the Muslim world, the woman has been victimized in the rape. She ends up being punished, because it's believed that this woman who's been raped, a Muslim woman, in some way her behavior and dress must have contributed to the crime, bringing shame to the community. In Islam, shame and honor are big important words. And when a Muslim woman reports a rape, oftentimes, instead of those who done the rape being justly punished, it's the woman, because she brought shame to the community. She's punished. Can you fathom that? But that goes on in the Muslim world. The question is, will there be real justice for this precious and innocent child? When I think of these little children, I'm reminded of the love and compassion that Jesus had for them. There's an incident in the Bible where the parents brought their children to Jesus so that he could lay hands on them and pray for them and bless them. And in response to this, the disciples scolded the parents for bothering Jesus. Yet, Jesus responded by saying, "Let the children come to me. Don't stop them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to those who are like these little children." The lives of children are precious to Jesus. Like the old nursery rhyme, Jesus loves the little children. All the little children of the world, red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Picture here in my blog of Jesus kissing the top of a young girl's head. Now, hospital authorities sadly confessed that this child will be traumatized for life. I can visualize right now Jesus holding this precious child in his arms and praying for her. The innocent lives of children are under attack. Just recently in Iran, a law was passed granting fathers the right to marry their adopted daughters. We must speak up for the little ones. We must not allow any society to engage in the psychological and physical abuse of our children in order to gratify their sexual depraved lusts. There must be justice for these precious and innocent lives. And please join me in praying and speaking out for the little ones so that they can grow up normally and not be traumatized for the rest of their lives. I tell you, in this case, in this horrific case, is beyond words. Pray for this young 3-year-old child in Saudi Arabia that God will heal her from the inside out, heal her of this trauma, and bring her out of this coma. It is one of the saddest, deplorable stories that I've really ever read. I want to now shift a little gear here for you. I want to talk a little bit about my brother Saeed Abedini, who is still languishing in Evin prison. Just a month and a half ago, there was a prayer vigil where people all over the world, and many, many countries besides the United States, joined hands in praying for Pastor Saeed's release and the release of all other Christian persecuted prisoners. It's been a very, very difficult time for Saeed's wife, Nagma, and her their two children, Rebecca and Jacob. I want to bring you the latest details about what's going on with Saeed since the prayer vigil, and since Nagma actually personally hand-delivered a letter from Saeed to President Rouhani's security guard in New York. What's been happening? Remember, in the recent past here, over a month ago, Iran did release several political prisoners, and unfortunately, Saeed was not one of them. So I want to read this article to you and bring you up to date on the latest happenings with Saeed. This is put out by the Christian Post World and from the ACLJ, the American Center for Law and Justice. Pastor Saeed Abedini, by the way, has revealed that he and fellow prisoners in Tehran are waiting on Iran to follow through with promises to start releasing thousands of prisoners of conscience, which so far has not happened. In recent weeks, hopes have been high that Iran was preparing to do the right thing and release Pastor Saeed and other prisoners of conscience as part of a good faith, showing newly elected President Rouhani, who said he is going to be a moderate and he is going to stand up for the rights of prisoners. This has been his promise, this has been his platform, more freedom for people in Iran. The Iranian-American pastor has been imprisoned in Evin prison in Tehran for more than a year, serving an 8-year sentence. Now, the American Center for Law and Justice has said that the pastor is being punished, of course, for his Christian faith, a fate that a number of other prisoners of conscience in the Islamic country are also facing. It's illegal for a Muslim, of course, to convert to Christianity in Iran. He or she can face the death penalty. Now, Iranian President Rouhani has been described as a moderate, like I mentioned, by many news sources, and his administration released 12 prisoners as an act of good faith several weeks ago. Of course, that was in preparation for his speech at the United Nations, and playing politics, I think, with the world. And this was followed by official announcements that another 80 prisoners of conscience would be released, as well as reports in the Iranian media that claimed another 1,241 were set to be released in conjunction with the religious holidays coming up. So far, however, only a handful of people have been released, and most of them have been, really at the end of their prison sentence, maybe a few weeks left. So this, once again, is the question we grapple with. Is Rouhani really going to stand up for the platform of moderatism? He claims to be a moderate, or it's claimed that he is a moderate. We can only wait and see. Now, of course, if you've been following the Cross in the Desert videos, you know I've been talking about this case for a very long time. It was just back in September that on a phone call, President Barack Obama did urge President Hassan Rouhani to release Saeed Abedini. That was back in September. And it's an ongoing battle for Nagma, dealing with a lot of hopelessness, and her children dealing with the same thing as well. They want to see their father. I want to finish by reading a statement from the legal director of the ACLJ, Tiffany Barnes. She shared with the Christian Post in an email that there has not yet been a formal response from Rouhani about Saeed's case. Rouhani supposedly got this letter from the security guard that Nagma gave to. What we do know is that after the President of the United States raises the matter and the European Parliament, a politically body representing 28 countries, calls publicly for Pastor Saeed's release, that Iran can no longer claim ignorance about him. The ball is in Iran's court, and it is time that Iran responds to the multitude of voices calling for Pastor Saeed's immediate release. As to why Iran is so far failing to release the prisoners it said it would, the International Legal Director says Iran was able to ride the positive media attention of its announcement that it had planned to release prisoners. But as the days and weeks have passed, Iran has not yet released an overwhelming majority of the promised group that was supposed to be released. I want you to know something. The executions still continue in Iran. Rouhani is not a moderate. Business as usual, persecution of Christians, execution of political prisoners is still happening in Iran. So I would ask you two things. Nagma has publicly said on Facebook she's asking her Christian friends to please pray and fast this week for God to move in Saeed's situation and bring about his freedom. And that's the least we can do, is spend a few minutes of our busy time in prayer and fasting for Saeed's release. Well, I want to finish up tonight by telling you a little bit about my weekend, my book signing for Tears in a Bottle. Tears in a Bottle, the name of my book, was at Family Christian Bookstore this past week, and I also featured my other books there, Beyond the Veil, Shining Star, The Promise, Driven by the Wind, The Rose of Nuruz, and of course the book Tears in a Bottle, which is the story of a friendship between a Christian woman and a Muslim woman. I really spent some quality time in some conversations with my customers, sharing with them the plight of my Iranian friends and their struggle for peace and freedom. I handed out Iran 30 prayer books, which allows the customers to take an entire month praying for the nation of Iran, for various situations, the economy, the parliament, the president, the supreme leader, Christians who are persecuted and meet secretly. It's a prayer book. And I also handed out a lot of my Cross in the Desert blogs to give awareness about the situation in Iran and to the customers that come into the bookstore. And many of them have heard about Iran but didn't know the depth of the suffering. They didn't know a whole lot about Saeed, and so I was able to give out this information to them. It's always a privilege for me to interact with my customers where I work at Family Christian Bookstore and share with them the struggle that my friends are dealing with in Iran every day. I would just simply ask you to just pray for my friends in Iran, that they will one day realize their dreams and have the same peace and freedom that you and I have. And they suffer financially, economically with the sanctions, spiritually, physically. They long for the freedom that you and I so rightfully enjoy, but so take for granted every day. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of The Cross in the Desert. If you want to get in contact with me, come to my Facebook page, Randy L. Noble, and friend request me, and you'll see lots of articles and blogs dealing with the situation in Iran. I really appreciate your time spending with me. God bless you. I will see you on the next edition of The Cross in the Desert. Good night.